Hello and welcome to episode number 26 of the Joe Cannon Health Podcast. I am Joe Cannon. The topic for today's episode is going to be apple cider vinegar, specifically apple cider vinegar as it pertains to helping people lose weight. This has been a very popular topic for decades that I'm aware of, and it probably goes back even further than that. But what I want to do in this episode, for at least for the most part, is talk about the actual clinical research on apple cider vinegar as it pertains to helping people lose weight. Now, before we go into that, I want to thank someone for leaving me another 5-star review in Apple Podcasts. This comes from Cassie Cram. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Cassie Cram basically says, listening and practicing what I learned from each episode has helped improve my health and lifestyle in many ways without paying tons of money. Joe explains everything in layman's terms to make it easy to understand and practice. I highly recommend his health podcast to everyone, especially episode 9 about exercise benefits. Joe, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. Cassie Cram, I appreciate you saying that. These podcasts are actually a lot of fun for me to do, even though I'm usually more at ease in front of an audience, which is the opposite of most people. I actually like sitting behind a microphone in my office right now, talking to people. It's an awful lot of fun. So I'm really grateful that you're taking a lot of benefit from these. It actually makes my day to hear that. So thank you very much. Now, before we get into the meat of the episode about apple cider vinegar, I do want to talk about one myth that I think is very popular in the world of health and fitness and wellness, and that involves caffeine. Does caffeine and caffeinated beverages dehydrate people? This is a myth that actually dates back a lot further than I even imagined. It dates back to the late 1920s. Back then, there was a study that noted coffee caused people to urinate more. And this appears to be the main research behind a lot of the dehydration caffeine phobia that even permeates the population today. So what I can say about this study is that as popular as it appears to be, it only involved 3 people, and that's not a lot of people. And there was no placebo group. In other words, they did not compare caffeine to non-caffeine beverages, and so that's a problem. And also, all this research appeared to show is that when men drank coffee, they increased their urination a little bit. In other words, this was not a study about dehydration. This was really a study about urination. And that's a big problem because urination and dehydration are not the same thing. Now, I believe this is a myth, and I believe it's a myth because research has shown it does not appear to be true. Caffeine does not appear to have a dehydrating effect compared to, say, a placebo drink, no caffeine. So this actually has been researched, and again, it basically shows that there's no dehydration effect of caffeine versus no caffeine, and even the dosage of caffeine does not appear to play a role in dehydrating people either. So what's going on here? So for me, I think the takeaway message is that the research shows that caffeine is not a diuretic. In other words, it does not increase urination. And I think that's especially true if you're used to caffeine. If you're not used to caffeine, it's possible that it may have a mild diuretic effect and make you urinate a little bit more. But for those of us who drink caffeinated beverages, I don't think it's going to have any effect whatsoever. So again, if caffeine increases urination, again, that does not necessarily mean it's going to cause you to be dehydrated. Urination and dehydration don't mean the same thing. And again, really doesn't mean the same thing unless you don't replace the fluids that you urinated out. Most people don't have a problem taking in extra fluids. That's another reason why I don't see any issue with caffeine being a dehydrating compound. I don't think it is, especially when you consider that when you think about the fluids that we take in to replace the fluids we lose, we even count the fluids in food. So for instance, if you eat a juicy steak, well, there's some liquid in that. If you eat a salad, there's some liquid in that. All that liquid counts. So, and again, coffee counts, tea counts. So again, I really do think this is a myth. I don't think that for the vast majority of people listening to me right now, caffeine or coffee or any kind of caffeinated beverage has any effect on dehydrating us whatsoever. So I believe this is a myth. Myth busted. Okay, so much for the myth of the week. Let's tackle apple cider vinegar. Now, before we go any further, I want to tell you kind of a funny, embarrassing story because I do have a little bit of a connection to this apple cider vinegar thing. It actually dates back to the early 1990s. And I was basically doing a live radio call-in show. And the topic for that morning was bogus weight loss supplements that actually had no evidence that they worked. And during this particular radio program, somebody called in. And it was my mom. Yes, my mom called in to a live radio show to extol the virtues of, wait for it, apple cider vinegar. My mom did not tell me she was going to call into this radio show. She just blindsided me, and that was my mom. If you knew my mom, yeah, she would kind of do things like that from time to time, and to say it was an embarrassment is an understatement. Again, it was live radio. Listening to my mom go on and on about how apple cider vinegar really worked is something I was not expecting. So what did I do? Well, I made a mistake. So basically, I dismissed my mom's claims, again, on live radio. Definitely not the right thing to do to your mom. And for those of you who are wondering, yeah, I paid a price later on in that day. We'll leave it at that. I paid a price. So I'll just let you know, I will put my foot in my mouth from time to time, but, it's kind of rare I'll put both feet in my mouth. Yeah, I put both feet in my mouth that day. So obviously I could have handled the situation better, like maybe being better prepared for the unexpected. But who would expect your mom would call in to a radio show live? But it happened. It is what it is. And again, what I could have done also is remember the old science proverb. And it's something that I tell myself over and over again as I investigate supplements. And it goes like this. Lack of evidence does not necessarily mean something doesn't work. Lack of evidence doesn't necessarily mean something doesn't work. It just means it doesn't yet have any evidence. Basically, nobody's looked at it yet. And that was the state of affairs in the early 1990s. Nobody had actually taken apple cider vinegar into the lab to see if it actually had any weight loss effects. Well, what I can say is, if my mom were around today, yeah, I'd apologize again because it does appear to look like my mom was right and I was wrong. So what I want to do for, again, the remainder of our time this week is talk about some of the research on apple cider vinegar and weight loss, basically show you the research, cover the results of those research, and I also want to cover some potential side effects and things you might want to think about if you're going to try this for yourself. Before we go any further, what is apple cider vinegar? So it is essentially a product that's made by taking apple juice and adding bacteria and yeast to the apple juice. This, through fermentation, causes apple cider vinegar to be made. And because it's a vinegar, it doesn't taste very good. And that sour taste in all vinegar is due to acetic acid. Acetic acid, again, gives the vinegar its taste, but also I want you to keep in mind and remember that acetic acid appears to be, let's say, the secret sauce behind some of the weight loss benefits of apple cider vinegar, and maybe even some of the other benefits as well, as we'll talk about. So acetic acid, very, very important, as I'll talk about later on in this episode. So what is this research on weight loss and apple cider vinegar? Well, As of right now, there are 2 human clinical studies. And there are some laboratory animal research, rats and stuff like that. We're not rats, so I tend to bypass some of that stuff. I like to go right to the people research because we're people. So what do we got? Again, 2 studies. The first study came out in 2009 after my mom embarrassed me. And this research involved 155 overweight men and women. This is, to my knowledge, the largest study to date. And it was a 3-month study, so it lasted a long time. And that's good for weight loss studies. We want them to last, at least 3 months. You'll see results after 3 months. But they took these 155 people and they broke them up into 3 groups. One group got a placebo beverage. Again, no apple cider vinegar whatsoever. The other 2 groups, they basically consumed an apple cider vinegar beverage, and both groups they basically drank 2 different amounts of apple cider vinegar. One group had a half an ounce of apple cider vinegar, and the other group drank 1 ounce of apple cider vinegar. Okay, and that basically came between if we're talking in terms of tablespoons, a half a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar a day. Again, mixed with a 16-ounce beverage. Can be anything. If I remember right, they didn't really talk about what the beverage was, but it doesn't really seem to matter for the effects. After this 12-week study was over, these researchers noticed that there is indeed a difference between those consuming apple cider vinegar and those consuming the placebo beverage. What do they find? Well, those consuming the vinegar, their body weight went down, their body fat went down, their visceral fat was reduced as well. Visceral fat is the fat in our muscles, and it's if you ever look at a steak, you'll sometimes see streaks of fat inside the steak itself, and that marbling effect, that's visceral fat. Visceral fat is thought to be a much more dangerous type of fat than the subcutaneous fat, which is just below our skin, the jiggly stuff. That's not so bad, but it's that marbling, that visceral fat that's actually worse for us. So their visceral fat went down. Their body mass index went down as well. Body mass index is essentially another measure of body fat, and it's basically your weight and your height divided into each other. If you jump back to episode number 6, I did a deep dive into body mass index, so check that out for more insights in that. But BMI went down, body mass index went down. Their waist circumference, the circumference around their belly area, that went down as well. And they had significantly lower triglyceride levels. Triglycerides are the fats that float around our bloodstream. And we don't want to have triglyceride levels that are too high because that's a risk factor for heart disease and stroke. So all of these 6 benefits I just told you, they were significantly better than the placebo group, who, again, just drank some random placebo beverage. Now, again, they didn't use a lot of apple cider vinegar. It only ranged from about a half a tablespoon to about 2 tablespoons per day. So not a whole lot. Keep that in mind. And if we just look at weight loss, because that's, again, what I want to make the main focus of this about, how much weight did they actually lose? Well, when I looked at this study, the weight loss that they observed ranged from about 2.5 pounds to about 4 pounds. So not a whole bunch of weight loss, but the fact that they didn't change anything, all they did was drink a little bit of apple cider vinegar, this appeared to lead to between 2.5 to 4 pounds of weight loss over the course of 3 months. That's, again, pretty interesting since they didn't change their eating, they didn't change their exercise, they didn't change anything. All they did was use between a half a tablespoon and 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar per day. This is the biggest study to date on the benefits, the weight loss benefits of apple cider vinegar. Now, I got one other study out there, and it comes out in 2018, so a much more recent investigation. Smaller study. Here, researchers in Iran randomly gave 39 people either apple cider vinegar or a placebo. And they combined that with a low-calorie eating program. Okay, so basically what they did was they split them up into 2 groups, and the 2 groups look like this. You had the apple cider vinegar group, and in conjunction with that, they ate 250 fewer calories per day. And the other group simply just ate a 250 calorie fewer diet per day. So you got one group that combines eating a few less calories with apple cider vinegar, and the other group just eats that same lower calorie diet. Oh, and by the way, the apple cider vinegar, all they used, 2 tablespoons a day, 1 at lunch, and another tablespoon was consumed with dinner. Okay. And again, this study also lasted 3 months. What do they find? Well, makes no surprise here that both groups lost weight because they ate fewer calories. Anytime you're going to cut your calories, you're going to lose some weight. That makes sense. But those who also used the vinegar, they lost even more weight. When I did the math, it came to around 9 pounds. These people consuming apple cider vinegar lost about 9 pounds versus the people who just cut their calories lost around 5 pounds. So again, another study appears to show there seems to be some sort of a weight loss effect going on here with vinegar and acetic acid. Again, other benefits that these people noted, again, those who were getting the apple cider vinegar, they had, again, lower levels of triglycerides. Their appetite decreased. And that's interesting because several people have told me over the years they use apple cider vinegar to reduce their appetite. This study appears to substantiate what they're saying. And in addition to all that, the people using the vinegar also had an increase in their HDL cholesterol. HDL is high density lipoprotein. We know it better as good cholesterol. HDL is the form of cholesterol which is supposed to actually lower our risk of heart disease. Now, again, these people reported lower appetites when they used apple cider vinegar. Other researchers have also shown that apple cider vinegar seems to slow down what's called gastric emptying. Gastric emptying is fancy talk for the time it takes for food to leave the stomach. So in theory, this might explain how vinegar might have appetite-reducing benefits. The longer it takes food to get out of our stomach, theoretically, the more fuller we might feel for a longer period of time. This, in turn, might lead to a lower appetite. So there you have it. Right now, we've got 2 clinical studies on apple cider vinegar and weight loss. Basically, we've got a study showing between maybe a 2 and 4 pound weight loss, and we've got another study showing perhaps as much as maybe a 9 pound weight loss with apple cider vinegar. I personally think that 9 pounds is expecting a little bit too much of this, so I'll be conservatively optimistic and say if you're going to try this for losing weight, maybe you might expect to see, let's say, between 2 and maybe 5 pounds of weight loss over the course of 3 months or so. Again, could vary from person to person. And again, while some of you may not call this a weight loss miracle, the fact of the matter is we have 2 studies showing there does appear to be something going on in terms of helping people lose weight. And again, if you're thinking, again, that may not be a whole lot, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, maybe 4 or 5 pounds, consider that if you lose a little bit of weight, this is also going to lead to less joint pain, and less joint pain maybe on your knees and your hips and your feet. That might actually be the impetus to get people to get outside and start, moving around more. And I don't have to tell you, more beneficial, for instance, moving can be. Again, episode number 9, as I mentioned in the beginning, is all about the health benefits of exercise. Anything you do to move more can have drastic beneficial improvements on our overall health. And as for maybe the lack of studies, your guess is good as mine why there's only 2 studies. Again, this has been around, apple cider vinegar has been around for a long time, decades, in fact. You would think that, say, Big Vinegar would be all over this. But again, this is the state of affairs right now. We've got 2 clinical studies. Hopefully, Big Vinegar would want to take a look at this and start funding more research. But who knows, maybe there's just not a lot of money to be made in funding studies on weight loss for vinegar, since maybe you can't patent vinegar. I don't know. But if there's any college students listening to me right now, hint, hint, this would make an excellent thesis or dissertation topic. Just saying. I think you might get published in a clinical journal if you did this. So anyway, that's what I would say. If you're an enterprising college student, this is something maybe you want to take a look at. So two studies aside, if apple cider vinegar really works, and it does appear through two studies it does, how does it affect weight loss? Well, remember that acetic acid is something to keep in the back of your mind. Acetic acid appears to be something that plays a role in terms of the weight loss benefits of this stuff. How does it work? Well, it is complicated, but the idea kind of goes like this. Acetic acid in the vinegar activates an enzyme, and the enzyme has got a big word, so I'm just going to abbreviate it. AMPK. AMPK is an energy-generating pathway enzyme. So AMPK helps us break down fats and sugars to turn into energy. So by triggering an increase in this AMPK enzyme, apple cider vinegar seems to basically ramp up our fat burning and our calorie burning production and essentially boosting our metabolic rate. So again, apple cider vinegar might boost metabolism a little bit by raising AMPK levels. Since we're talking weight loss, some of you may have thought, well, is it possible that apple cider vinegar might benefit diabetes? Well, maybe. Preliminary research does appear to show that apple cider vinegar, and again, we're not talking a lot here. We're talking anywhere from a half an ounce, that's about a tablespoon, or 20 milliliters if you're outside of America. So we're not talking a lot. Might increase insulin sensitivity. That's how well insulin works after eating. So it might help increase insulin sensitivity after eating. And again, this may benefit people who have what's called insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is basically your insulin's not working so well anymore. It's not working as well as it should be. And it's actually kind of serious because insulin resistance is one of the hallmarks of type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is the most common form of diabetes on earth. And so by helping insulin work better, apple cider vinegar may help people who are at the very least at the beginning stages of maybe metabolic syndrome, pre-diabetes, which again is the hallmark of a forerunner, if you will, of type 2 diabetes. So again, I'd like to see more diabetes research. I think that's actually quite interesting. We do know that exercise can benefit insulin sensitivity. We also know that weight loss can benefit insulin sensitivity. It'd be a very interesting investigation if we could somehow do something where we combine apple cider vinegar with exercise to see if it actually helped it work better than exercise alone. But that's where we're at right now. Again, if you're a college student, this is another great topic to take on as a thesis topic. Again, I really want to summarize that if we're talking weight loss and apple cider vinegar, it does not take a lot to see these benefits. You don't need to be guzzling vinegar to see these benefits. What we're seeing so far is maybe between 1 tablespoon and 2 tablespoons a day. So again, 1 tablespoon, that I did the math. That's about a half an ounce, or about 15 milliliters if you're outside of America, or maybe 2 tablespoons, which again is about 1 ounce, or about 30 milliliters. So 1 tablespoon, half an ounce, 15 milliliters, 2 tablespoons, 1 ounce, or about 30 milliliters. That's basically it. That's not a lot at all. And again, I personally would not use more than this. And in fact, being a conservative-minded guy I am, when it comes to this stuff, you might even want to start with a little bit less than that. Maybe start with half a tablespoon at first, just to see how you might respond, because we all might respond a little bit differently than others. But again, regardless of where you start, it doesn't take a lot to see these benefits. So what else out there should you be thinking about if you're going to be considering apple cider vinegar for anything? Well, number one, should you be using it with the mother? Now, the mother, this is a reference to whether the apple cider vinegar is filtered or unfiltered. The mother, as it's often called, actually using some of these brands actually even mention the mother on the label. The mother is a combination of yeast and bacteria and minerals and other stuff. basically the mother is unfiltered vinegar, and it gives the vinegar, the apple cider vinegar, a cloudy appearance. So apple cider vinegar that looks cloudy will have the mother, the yeast, bacteria, etc. Filtered apple cider vinegar will be clear. It won't have any of those yeast and bacteria, etc. So is it better to use apple cider vinegar with the mother or the clear apple cider vinegar? I can't say either way. There really isn't a lot of research on filtered versus unfiltered in terms of what's better for weight loss. The studies don't really differentiate, filtered versus unfiltered that I could see. It's possible that maybe all those yeast and bacteria in the unfiltered may have different effects. For instance, I wonder if maybe they might affect our microbiome. But again, it's definitely something that I think we need more research on. I can't say either way if there's a benefit to the mother or not the mother. So I'm going to leave it to you, whatever it is your personal preference is. The other thing that goes really, really popular topic when it comes to apple cider vinegar is, well, it doesn't taste very good. So do you have to drink this stuff straight, or can you dilute it and stuff? The good news is, yeah, you can dilute it. And one of the studies I talked about, that's actually what happened. They diluted it in a beverage. So you can cut that. You can take it straight if you want, but you can also add it to juice, a smoothie. You can put it in your yogurt. It doesn't really matter, which way you take it. So again, that's actually great because again, I've tasted it. It doesn't taste very good. So knowing that I don't have to taste it as much as if I took it by a tablespoon is actually good news for me and a bunch of other people. Now, I've said over and over again in this episode, apple cider vinegar. What about other types of vinegar? For instance, you may have in your kitchen right now white vinegar. And the thing to realize is that the acetic acid content between many vinegars is pretty much the same. If we're talking apple cider vinegar, the acetic acid content is anywhere from 5% to 6%. With white vinegar, it's about 4 to 7% or so, maybe 8%. So it's pretty similar. And based on that, I think any weight loss benefits between, say, apple cider vinegar, white vinegar, other vinegars is going to be about the same as long as their acetic acid content is similar to each other. If you're in that, 4 to 7%, I think you're in the sweet spot. So I don't think it really matters what type of vinegar you use as long as you're in that 4 to 7% range. In terms of how much is too much, I've made it a point of telling you how much apple cider vinegar has been used in research because I don't think you need to use more than 2 tablespoons per day. That's what the research so far has been telling us is the upper limit of what you need to use. And if you're just starting out, I would use as least as possible. As I said earlier, I would start with maybe a half a tablespoon a day. Mix that in some yogurt or juice or something like that. I don't think everybody should be starting at 2 tablespoons per day. Again, research also shows that a half will work also. So again, to cut down on any possible side effects you might have, let's go with the least amount that maybe you can tolerate at first. And that's another reason to try this because it has such a bad taste. You might want to get used to the taste. So starting again with the least amount possible, I think is the way to go. And again, remember that acetic acid levels in apple cider vinegar range around 4%, 6%, 7%, something like that. Don't think again that more acetic acid is better. There are some products out there that may have over 20% acetic acid. Technically, 20% acetic acid is what I sometimes see in, say, natural weed killer products and natural cleaners and stuff like that. I've seen some reference that over 20% acetic acid is sometimes even considered as poison. So again, don't think more acetic acid is better. Sometimes less is more. And I think this is one of those times when less is going to be better for you. So 4 to 7% is basically what you probably even have in your kitchen right now. That's what you want to aim for. And while we're talking about apple cider vinegar, the liquid, the stuff that may be in your kitchen right now, you may be wondering about apple cider vinegar supplements. This episode is actually based on a question that a friend of mine asked me recently about some apple cider vinegar supplement that she had heard about. And that's what got me delving into this topic. So what I can say is when it comes to these apple cider vinegar pills out there, I'm going to recommend exercising caution. And I say this because there has been some testing of various apple cider vinegar supplements in the past, and sometimes they find a wide range in acetic acid content. Sometimes some supplements don't have any acetic acid in them. Sometimes they may even have more than 20% acetic acid. That's a problem right there because that goes to maybe some quality control issues. Again, we sometimes run into this with dietary supplements as a rule, unfortunately. But again, we're talking the liquid, I think, is going to be better than the supplements. Remember, the research on weight loss is actually not on supplements. It's on basically liquid vinegar, apple cider vinegar. So again, that's another reason why I personally would be a little cautious of using the supplements. Will they work the same as, say, a liquid vinegar product? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I personally like to stick as closely to what the research finds as I possibly can. And I don't see any research on apple cider vinegar dietary supplements. Now, I understand why some of you might not like the taste of the vinegar, so a supplement may appeal to some people. And if that's you, great. The only thing I would say is investigate who you do business with. Don't just go by all the 5-star reviews you see online. Again, maybe look at some of the 3-star reviews because they may give you some of the good and maybe they're not so good. You really want to investigate who you're doing business with. So to help you, what I will suggest is go all the way back to episode number 1. The very first episode of my podcast, I gave you a whole bunch of tips and strategies on how to investigate a dietary supplement. So definitely skip back there for much more insights. I basically told you a lot of the things I do myself when I write reviews on supplements over at my site, supplementclarity.com. So I didn't hold anything back. I told you how to investigate a supplement and also what to look for in companies as well. You always want to investigate the companies because I think that's something most of us don't think about too much. So again, I like the liquid, but if you like the supplements, okay, just be aware the research is on the liquid, not the supplements. Again, do your due diligence and find a supplement that's right for you. So in terms of side effects, I'm usually known for talking about things you should be thinking about if you're going to take either food or dietary supplements. But again, there are some things in terms of apple cider vinegar I think you should be thinking about. So it's been around thousands of years. I mean, gee whiz, even since the time of the Bible and before, there has been vinegar. So vinegar's safe, especially when consumed, in small amounts in food and stuff like that. So I have no problem with that. But what I would say is, let me give you some things to think about, and also some findings of some reports of vinegar that help you better try this out for yourself. Number one, I would basically stop using any kind of vinegar and vinegar product supplement at least 2 weeks before having surgery. Vinegar might have a blood thinning effect. And again, that's something to consider if anybody listening to me takes any kind of blood thinner medications. Sidebar, that's actually a pretty good rule of thumb to think about if you're taking any dietary supplement. Over the years, I have looked at thousands probably of dietary supplements. And when in doubt, generally speaking, supplements tend to have primitive blood thinning properties. And so for those of us who are healthy and not taking blood thinner medications, there's not going to be any problem. But people who are taking blood thinner medications, again, the addition of the blood thinning supplement with the blood thinning medication might over thin the blood, and this could cause some pretty bad things happening. Maybe you might bleed, for instance, and maybe not be able to bleed if you cut your finger, for instance. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm an exercise physiologist who has investigated supplements for over 20 years, and I can tell you that this primitive blood thinning effect is very common to many different supplements that I've seen over the years. For instance, just off the top of my head as I speak to you right now, these are some of the dietary supplements that have blood thinning effects. Vitamin A, vitamin E, ginkgo, ginseng, garlic, resveratrol, CoQ10, fish oil, krill oil, garlic. Yeah, I probably already named that, but you get the point. generally speaking, supplements tend to have blood thinning effects. So if you have any kind of blood thinning medications you're taking, it's good to run all this stuff past your doctor before you're taking anything new. Again, that's one of my rules of thumb. It has served me well over the years. And it's, again, something that I always bring up to people when they ask about supplements. And then when in doubt, you can always go talk to your pharmacist as well. Because if you're taking blood thinning medications, you're probably getting them from a pharmacy. Pharmacists are pretty smart cookies when it comes to medication and even supplement and drug interactions. So again, 2 weeks before surgery, get off all that stuff unless your doctor tells you otherwise. If you have any kind of medical issues, like for instance, diabetes, talk to your doctor first. Remember, apple cider vinegar and maybe even apple cider vinegar supplements may have a blood sugar lowering effect. This in turn could theoretically interfere with blood sugar lowering medications. We don't want your blood sugar to go too high, but we also don't like it when your blood sugar goes too low either. Either of those instances can actually be pretty bad for us. So again, diabetes, always a special case when it comes to things you're going to start adding to your diet. In terms of pregnant and breastfeeding, not a lot of research in any of this stuff, so especially this supplement. So if you're in those categories, you're nursing babies, you're pregnant, talk to your doctor. And just something to think about is, and I think it's a rarity, but high amounts of apple cider vinegar have been shown to lower potassium levels. Potassium is a very important mineral that, again, unfortunately, most people, at least in America, don't tend to get a lot of in their diet because they don't tend to eat the foods that contain potassium. Food for thought, we all think of bananas when it comes to potassium, but a baked potato has twice as much potassium as a banana. But regardless, high amounts of apple cider vinegar and maybe vinegar in general could lower potassium levels. And when I say high amounts, I'm talking many ounces per day might actually do this. Again, far more than most people would probably be taking. But I'm going to throw it out to you just so you have all cards on the table. And then also remember, acetic acid is an acid. And while it's a weak acid, it could, in theory, cause some chemical burns to the skin, especially if it's applied long term. There have been a couple of reports of this. And while it's possibly rare for most people, I do think it's something to consider, especially if you're using this in terms of shampoos and conditioners, which I know they're out there. Again, since it is an acid, I think it's a good idea, especially if you're taking this stuff straight through the tablespoon or something like that. Rinse your mouth out after you do drink it because it is an acid, and it might wear away dental enamel and could in theory lead to cavities. There is at least one report of this happening. Again, the report is usually a little bit over the top. This was a report of an individual who was drinking 8 ounces of apple cider vinegar a day. That's 250 milliliters for those of us outside the country of America. And that's far more than most people would be consuming. But again, when in doubt, rinse your mouth out just to be safe. And that's true for any kind of acidic beverage you're drinking, like for instance, even diet soda. It also has an acid, which could, again, wear away dental enamel. And again, getting back to the acidic properties of this stuff, because I do know that there are shampoos and conditioners based on apple cider vinegar. Don't get it in your eyes, it burns. So enough said. I don't have to beat that dead horse. As I said, again, it may have some blood sugar lowering effects. Again, it improves insulin sensitivity. And so the better insulin works, the lower blood sugar might go. For those who are diabetic, there could be an interaction with medication. So again, it goes right back to what I said before, talk to your doctor. After that, I do want to bring up this odd report to you. This is the only report I've ever seen of this, but I'll just throw it out to you just in case you have this very strange side effect. This report comes basically from a 72-year-old man who used 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar for 2 weeks. He developed hiccups that lasted for 9 days until he went to the hospital. I personally think this is a long shot. I have never heard of anything other than this report of this ever happening. But again, it's another reason why I think it's best to start with the least possible dose and see how you respond. So don't start, for instance, taking 2 tablespoons a day like this person did. Maybe start with, for instance, a half a tablespoon every couple of days for the first week or 2. Just see how you respond. And then slowly raise that amount to whatever it is you feel is comfortable for you. not going above that 2 tablespoon mark. Again, hiccups, not sure what's up with this hiccup thing. Again, I've only seen one report of it, but 9 days of hiccups. I mean, that's, we normally don't take hiccups that seriously, but if they last 9 days, that's kind of serious. It's at the very least annoying, but I wouldn't want to experience that. So let's not be that guy. Let's be conservative and start with the least amount, slowly raise it to the amount you feel comfortable with. Along the same lines, there's another odd report that I want to bring to your attention. This is a report of osteoporosis. Earlier, I told you about how apple cider vinegar might lower potassium levels. Well, that was basically, I was referencing this actual study of a woman who, for lack of a better term, she developed osteoporosis. Now, what happened here was she drank 8 ounces of apple cider vinegar per day for 6 years. Takes a long time for bones to break down, and this woman, for whatever reason, was drinking an awful lot of apple cider vinegar, far more than I've ever heard of anybody drinking where. So let's not do that. Not necessary to drink 8 ounces. Think about that. That's like a cup a day of apple cider vinegar. That's proof that this stuff has a natural health remedy reputation. It's been around a long time. People take it for a lot of reasons. The key is more is not always better, and everything is going to have a side effect, and sometimes side effects could take a long time to show up. So again, less is more. If you're going to talk about taking maybe a supplement, not only investigate who you're dealing with, but also realize there have been a little bit of reports out there where some of these capsules may get stuck in the throat, and because apple cider vinegar has acetic acid, there may be some burns of the throat and esophagus. It's a rarity, but I wanted to bring your attention. And while I highly doubt most people are going to have any problems with apple cider vinegar, just remember low doses are probably better than more doses, especially until we have more research. So at the end of the day, what's the verdict on apple cider vinegar? Well, we got a couple studies that do appear to show that apple cider vinegar helps weight loss, although the effects do appear to be modest. Again, my opinion is, 2 to 4 pounds, maybe 5 pounds at the most. That said, that's insignificant. That's significant in my opinion. I mean, if you lose 5 pounds, for some people that could mean less knee pain, which could mean they're more likely to get out and do more activity, and activity means more health benefits. So given the low cost, again, and the fact that there's more evidence for this than a lot of weight loss supplements that you've probably heard of before, I think overall there's not a lot of downsides to, maybe a half a tablespoon or a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar a couple times a week. So if you've tried it, let me know what happens. I'll be curious to find out. I'm going to list all the citations along with a video I did on apple cider vinegar I posted on YouTube in the episode notes of this episode. So definitely do check that out for more insights. And for those who do want to support the podcast, somebody asked me about this week. 2 easy peasy ways to do that would be simply just share my episodes with your friends. The more people who subscribe to my podcast and listen to my podcast, the better. The other way you can support my podcast very easily is if you do purchase anything on Amazon, just click on my Amazon associate link first. It doesn't cost you anything, and it definitely helps me keep the lights on over here. I'm going to put a link in the episode notes so you can find my Amazon link and use it. And you can also find it at either of my websites, joe-cannon.com and supplementclarity.com. As always, if you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, feel free to drop me an email. Again, this episode actually started from a question a friend of mine asked me just this week. So with that, I'm going to bring this episode to a close by giving you the quote of the week. And this is actually one of my favorite quotes of all time. It's from the poet Robert Frost, who said, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the road less traveled, and that has made all the difference. Until next week, I'm Joe Cannon. Go out, be safe, and where you can, don't forget to try to make a difference.